Donald Trump leads in not just the battleground states, but also New Hampshire, Virginia, and New Mexico, according to the latest Democratic internal poll conducted after the first presidential debate. And in this video, we'll be taking a look at the electoral tally and fill in this map based on this new data. And we're going to start off by filling in the solid states for both candidates so that we can focus more on those more competitive races. And I mean, this poll is disastrous for the Biden campaign. If there's any poll where Biden should be doing well in, it should be a poll conducted by his own party. But even according to that data, the incumbent president is now trailing the former president in many states that should have been easy victories for Biden, considering he won them by pretty large margins in the 2020 election. And so with all of the non-competitive states filled in, map currently sits at 219 for Donald Trump to 181 for Joe Biden. Now, coming back to this new poll, we're going to begin with North Carolina and Georgia, two states that were very competitive in 2020. Joe Biden actually won Georgia by 0.2%, while Trump came out on top in the Tar Heel state by 1.3%. But look at the polling today. Donald Trump leads by 10.6% in North Carolina and 10.1% in Georgia. Now, before the debate, the margins were 8.5 and 7.9, still in favor of Trump. So this row here at the very right shows you that Donald Trump has gained around 2 points in both of these states just as a result of that first debate. And I mean, in a state that was decided by less than 2 points in both, I mean, that 2% shift is going to be pretty significant. And if you look at the average polling in North Carolina and Georgia, I mean, it tells a pretty similar story. Donald Trump has been dominating in the Tar Heel state here. He's been leading throughout the entirety of the election cycle. And if you move to Georgia, 3.7%. Joe Biden's actually gained a little bit over the last few weeks, but I mean, really, it's still been a pretty solid lead for Trump throughout the entirety of the election so far. So both Georgia and North Carolina are actually just a few points away from becoming solid on this map. Before we continue, only 10% of you guys are actually subscribed, so make sure you take the time to subscribe right now for more content like this leading up to the election in November. And now moving up a little bit on this list to Arizona and Nevada, these are two states that both went to Joe Biden, but now Trump leads by similar margins to Georgia and North Carolina, 9.7 and 8.8%. Just like in those first two states, Trump improved by around 2 percentage points as a result of the first presidential debate. And so when looking at both of these states, I mean, they were both blue in 2020. And yes, Biden was the first Democrat to win Arizona in nearly 30 years. However, this is still a state that's been trending to the left for many years now. I mean, they elected 2 Democratic senators in just the last few years, Mark Kelly and Kyrsten Sinema, who has since left the Democratic Party, but they also elected Katie Hobbs, a Democratic governor over Kari Lake in 2022. So these are really two states that Biden should be performing at least relatively well in, but here he is, down by 9 points and 10 points in two states that he won not only in his last election, but Nevada. Democrats have won this state going all the way back to 2008. But on this map, both Nevada and Arizona aren't even really going to be remotely competitive. Look at the polling right now in Arizona. It is a little bit lower than what we're seeing in this internal poll, but still, on average, Trump leads by 5.4%. And in a state that Joe Biden won last time, it has never been close. Joe Biden has always been behind Trump throughout the 2024 cycle, and right now, Trump's lead in the state is larger than it has ever been in the past. While in Nevada, 4.6%, this is signaling at least a 6-point swing, and again, with the exception of some polling we had back in November, Donald Trump has been ahead over the last 8 months. Moving up the list just a little bit more, and you'll find Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin, 3 states that are almost always at the center of discussion when it comes to American electoral politics. And if you were to list out all the competitive states and put them in order of how much they leaned in favor of the Democrats and Republicans, you would find Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania at the very center of that list. They are going to decide the 2024 election just like they did back in 2020, and in 2016. If Donald Trump wins even one of them, he has a very good chance at winning the presidency. For Joe Biden, he's going to win at least Pennsylvania, and he'll have to win Wisconsin or Michigan if he wants to even have a chance at securing 270 electoral votes. So now looking at the polling for 2024, Trump leads by 7 points in the Keystone State. In the Wolverine State, he's up by 7, and in Wisconsin, 4.2% is Trump's lead. And you see that as a result of the debate, Trump has increased by around 2 points in the polling in all 3 of the states. So if we're going to fill these states in on our map, both Pennsylvania and Michigan would be likely Republican. They wouldn't even seem all that competitive on this map. Only Wisconsin is a lean state, and just barely, as the margin sits right under 5 points. Looking at the polling averages in these 3 regions, in Pennsylvania, Trump leads by 4.5%. In fact, his margin now is larger than it's ever been. He has just taken a significant surge over the last few weeks. I mean, before the debate, he was still doing pretty well, but now his margin has nearly doubled, and it's become less competitive than it's been at any other point throughout the 2024 cycle. In Michigan, Trump leads by 0.6%. He was actually doing much better at the beginning of the year, but he is starting to grow his lead once again now that the debate is over. And in Wisconsin, Trump leads by 1.5%. Once again, right after that debate, you can see Biden's numbers have taken a pretty sharp fall, while Trump's have inched up just a little bit. Next up, we're going to move up to the 2nd District of Nebraska. We did just really quickly skip over it to focus on those 3 Rust Belt states together. But in the 2nd District, Trump leads by 4.3%, up 2 points from before the debate. And this is actually a region that Biden carried by nearly 7 points 4 years ago. And 8 years ago, it did actually go to Trump by a 2-point margin. We're probably going to see a return to a margin similar to what we saw in 2016. And so on our map, the 2nd District of Nebraska is going to very solidly be in that lean Republican category, just like Wisconsin. And now with 44 electoral votes left, I mean, just look at these states that we still have left to fill. I mean, these are states that the Biden campaign has now deemed to be in place so much that they have to do polling on it, and they've done polling both before and after the debate. So looking at the remaining states, I mean, the average margin for Biden in these states in 2020 was nearly 10 percentage points. Colorado, Biden won by 14%, New Mexico by 11%, Minnesota by 7%, Virginia by 10%, New Hampshire by 7%, and Maine by 9%. So these states were not at all supposed to be even remotely competitive, but they really do signal a shift in the electorate. The American people are moving towards Donald Trump, at least based on the most recent data that we have. And honestly, it's been confirmed just by the numbers we're seeing in the traditionally competitive states. In the Rust Belt, Trump leads everywhere. In the Sun Belt, once again, Trump is ahead in virtually every single state. So now we're going to first start off with New Hampshire, which is a state that Trump can definitely win, especially if you look at what happened 8 years ago. In 2016, Donald Trump came within just half a percentage point of flipping the Granite State, the closest a Republican's gone to winning it since the Bush era. And when looking at the polling for 2024, Donald Trump leads by 2.8%. He was already ahead by half a point before the debate, but as a result of Biden's performance, Trump increased his lead by 2.3%. And if you look at the polling here, the most recent poll conducted by St. Anselm shows Trump up by 2. Biden is still ahead in the polling average as a whole, but that's as a result of polls conducted 2 months ago, and one of them conducted by Marist College is from all the way back in January. So you really can't trust all of these really old numbers. Right now, Donald Trump seems to have taken the lead in the Granite State of New Hampshire, and it's going to fall into the lean column. Up in Virginia and New Mexico, these 2 states I'm going to cover together because they are 2 states that Biden won by virtually the same margin, 10.1% in Virginia and 10.8% in New Mexico. But looking at the polling now, Biden leads by 0.5 in New Mexico and 0.6 in Virginia. I mean, a 2-point shift in favor of Trump in both of these states, because before the debate, Joe Biden was actually leading by 2 points in New Mexico and 1.5 in Virginia. Now, they're both going to fall into the tilt Republican category. They aren't even blue anymore, despite Joe Biden's pretty large margins in both of these states in just the last election cycle. It is going to be a really embarrassing loss if Biden loses even just one of these two states. And so looking at the polling average in Virginia, Biden is still somehow up by 2.2%. The two most recent polls from May and June show a tie. The only reason why Biden's even afloat in Virginia right now is because of two polls conducted all the way back in December of last year, Biden +3 and +6, but these two polls really are not indicative of what's happening in the state right now. While in New Mexico, Biden does do better with the polling, although they are pretty old. Only this poll from June is actually from this year. Before this, all three of these polls were conducted in 2023 and 2022. So we don't have too much data from New Mexico, but according to Biden's latest internal poll, it does show a Trump lead. So both New Mexico and Virginia are going to fall into the tilt Republican category. Next up in Maine, we have a pretty dramatic shift here as well. 0.2% is Biden's margin. He is at least ahead in the state. He was up by 2 points before, but now it's virtually a dead heat in a state that Joe Biden won by 9 points just 4 years ago. Looking at the polling in Maine, I mean, this new poll isn't even an outlier. The most recent poll from the state shows Donald Trump leading by 6%. The only polls that have had Biden ahead were polls conducted back in 2023. And even this poll from October to November of last year still shows Biden leading by just 1 point. That's how concerning things have gotten for Joe Biden in the state of Maine, a state that hasn't even really been considered to be competitive in the last few decades. But Maine is now suddenly in play for Donald Trump, as right now, according to a poll conducted by the Biden campaign, he is only ahead by a tilt margin. It really cannot get any worse than that. Up in Minnesota, 0.4%. I mean, this is smaller than Hillary Clinton's margin of victory in 2016. She at least carried Minnesota by 1.5%. Yes, this was dangerously close to a flip, as Minnesota hasn't voted red since 1972. But now it could happen, as Donald Trump and Joe Biden are in a tie according to the most recent poll, and Biden's internal numbers are spelling some pretty disastrous signals for his campaign. And so as a result, Minnesota will, as just like Maine, be in that tilt Democratic column. This is not something that people expected to see, considering he did win the state by 7 points in the last election. And finally, we're left with Colorado. I mean, this one really is a gut punch for the Biden campaign. 1.9%. This is down from 14% 4 years ago. Joe Biden won Colorado by a solid margin. This was a state that hasn't gone red since 2004, and also a state that Joe Biden just made solid for the Democratic Party. Now it is back in play. 1.9% is Biden's margin. It's down 1.8 from pre-debate. And if you look at the polling here, almost all of the polls are pretty old, so these numbers really aren't too indicative of what's happening right now, but I don't expect things to get any better for Biden with any new polls that come out. So moving forward, it's only going to get worse for Biden in the state of Colorado, and the polling right now is signaling that it's going to be more competitive than it's been in the last 2 decades. So in looking at the 2024 electoral map based on the latest Democratic internal polls, what we're seeing right now is that Donald Trump is surging to new heights. He is leading in virtually every single swing state and is also taking the lead in New Hampshire, Virginia, and New Mexico, while Minnesota and Maine could not be more competitive, even though Biden does hold a very slight lead. So right now, Donald Trump leads with 335 electoral votes to Joe Biden's 203. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure you like it down below if you enjoyed it. Comment down below who you think is going to win the 2024 election and by how much. And subscribe to my channel right now if you haven't for more content like this leading up to the election in November.